Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to present a very interesting study that I carried out with my students from an MA program. And this presentation is teaching syntax at a master's level through sports newspaper articles. The presentation outline is the following. First, we're going to present the objective, afterwards the theoretical framework, then the methodology, and then the results, and finally the conclusions of our study. The objective of this communication is to describe a teaching learning experience of the syntax class in the master's program, Studies of English Languages and Cultures of the Mother Language Department of the University of Guadalajara. This is an empirical research, since the data analyzed in this study was obtained from a local experience, more particularly an experience in which we use sports newspaper articles in order to teach syntax. So we all know that syntax occupies the central position in the grammatical system of a language. However, it is important to remind us what syntax is and the important role that syntax plays in a language, especially when we are teaching content subjects to our students who are already pre-service teachers or certified teachers. According to Vallin, syntax is a part of linguistics that is involved in the study of sentence structure. Syntactic properties of a language enable the combination of simple sentences to form complex sentences. According to Miller, without syntax, human beings would not be able to construct messages conveying information about complex situations, proposals, or ideas. Wolfgang Reible says that communication can be based on simple sentences, but on clauses and utterances. And we need syntax. So the study of syntax for learners is challenging because they must know how to put words together in order to make, in order to produce a sentence, and in order to make this sentence meaningful in a specific context and avoid ambiguity. This is according to Smith. Joule says that many people know the meaning of many words. However, it's difficult to put the words together in a sentence that makes grammatical and logical sense. Most sentences are ambiguous when they lack syntax properties. So this experience, the experience I'm going to talk about in the following 10 minutes, it's an experience that we carried out in a group of 8 students of the MELSI program. This MELSI program is the MA in English Languages and Cultures. This belongs, as I said before, this program belongs to the Modern Languages Department of the University of Guadalajara. And my course, the syntax course, belongs to the 3rd semester of the program. We carried out this experience during 14 weeks, which is like the same duration of the course. And for this experience, we used the sports newspaper articles in order to teach syntax. The syntactic content of the course went from the simplest concepts, such as lexical categories, to more difficult content, such as compound complex sentences, syntactic tree analysis, and linking clauses, which is just like a very difficult topic. You could be asking right now, and why sports newspaper articles? Well, the idea of using sports newspaper articles was derived from the objectives of the course itself, which consists of making syntactic analysis based on everyday structures. We literally wanted to avoid the use of invented sentences, as Cook says, or even sentences that are presented in the textbooks, which are a little bit not very original or not very authentic. Therefore, we chose to work with sports newspaper articles because this semantic field is easily understood. Moreover, according to Suarez and others, sports newspaper articles are interesting for students and for almost everyone because it's familiar topic for young people. I mean, everyone has a knowledge of what's happening in sports. Even if you don't like it, you know a little bit something about that. So this is the basic idea. And furthermore, there are very, very few studies that propose the use of sports newspaper articles or the sports texts in the teaching language context. So that's why we also decided to work with this genre. And finally, an empirical research that combines the use of sports text to teach syntax, I mean, very theoretical subject, is we consider authentic. So our way of proceeding, based on the declarative and procedural objectives of the topics of each course session, we looked for textual fragments of recent sports newspaper articles, and in order to explain and illustrate the linguistic phenomena of the course. Once the elucidations, the syntactic elucidations and the examples were examined, were explained through the analysis of not only those sentences, but also the context in which they were presented, students were told to look for other examples of the topic in other discourse genres, such as stories, such as cooking recipes, etc., and to analyze them and present them in the class. So the idea was just to use authentic material in a very complex and theoretical class. I'm going to share with you only the results of, or I'm going to present only 3 examples, the example of 3 sessions. And well, this is an example of the first session of the course. In this case, 5 sports newspaper headlines were chosen to analyze the lexical categories that constitute these headlines. Determiners, nouns, adjectives, adverbs, verbs, conjunctions, etc. Why using headlines? Well, because headlines are texts by themselves, but very short and specific texts with specific syntax. The syntax that is used in headlines sometimes is not repeated or is not even used in other textual genres. So that's why we just said, well, let's begin with sports headlines, which are a very good example of studying syntax in English or in any language. And it's easy because they are really very short, so it was ideal for us. And well, once we define the categories and examine the headlines from a syntactic perspective, then students had to look for other examples. I mean, for other texts, as I told you before, such as cooking recipes, stories for children, songs, poems, etc., and analyze also the lexical categories in a fragment of those texts. Afterwards, students had to socialize their analysis in the class, where many discussions were generated. A little parenthesis here is that we had to face the COVID during our sessions. So when they had to socialize their analysis at the beginning of the class, it was face-to-face. However, afterwards, it was a little bit more complicated because it was through a platform. We used Schoology, and but discussions were generated there too, and it was very interesting. And the other, I mean, other discussions were generated also when we had the Zoom sessions. So afterwards, students socialized their analysis, and they had the discussions among them. Well, we just had a synthesis of what we learned through the use of these texts. And as we can see, in this session, for example, in two phases, the elucidation, illustration, and the production analysis, students examined real-life syntactic structures and not invented sentences or prototypical sentences which are just manipulated in order to analyze what we want to analyze. I mean, in this case, they had to face the real life sentences, and they had to examine them through syntactic terminology. Another example, well, I'm going to share with you the 6th session of the course. In this case, the topic was noun phrases and the operation of determination. And we read some fragments of a newspaper articles, and students were asked to find the noun phrases in the fragment and analyze the role in the sentence. So this is an example of what we analyzed. It's a Roger Federer text. And in this case, we have Roger Federer is the tennis player with the most triumphs in Wimbledon, the oldest and most prestigious trophy in the world, the Swiss leads, etc. So in this case, we analyzed all the noun phrases. Of course, Roger Federer is one noun phrase, but one challenging noun phrase was, for example, the tennis player with the most triumphs in Wimbledon, and also another noun phrase, the oldest and most prestigious trophy in the world. And besides analyzing the constituents of the noun phrases, we also analyzed the syntactic role or the syntactic function of these noun phrases within the sentence. And it was very interesting because and challenging too, because it is not obvious what we have here. So it was very interesting what we did. And at the end of the session, as a homework, they had to look for their own corpora, the corpora that they're using for their thesis, and they have just to come up with some noun phrases and then just discuss them. I mean, just to examine them and discuss the function of these noun phrases within the sentences. So it was very interesting too. And the last example that I want to share with you in this presentation, in this communication, is the 12th session. In this case, we had the topic of syntactic trees. That is not a very popular one. And in this case, we read some fragments, once again, of a newspaper article from The Guardian. And the students were asked to choose a sentence and analyze it syntactically. And this is one example of what my students did. The president spoke to the club this morning. So my students just analyzed this through the presentation of the lines and also the colors. And afterwards, we discussed a little bit the function of each constituent of the sentence. Well, conclusions. We believe that the originality of this study lies in the fact of using authentic material, such as sports newspaper articles, instead of invented sentences to teach syntax to students of an MA program. Moreover, we believe that with this experience, students are motivated to examine texts that they consult in their free time, every day. They could read everywhere and anywhere. And it's just like, well, these texts could be used to teach the language. And not only to teach the language in basic terms, but also to teach the language in a very advanced level. I mean, in the level of analyzing syntactically English language. And finally, students who are pre-service teachers or even certified teachers can see the importance of using authentic material in order to teach a complex topic of a foreign language. So that's basically what we can say about this experience. It is a very modest experience. However, well, I wanted to share it with you. These are the main references of our study, and I thank you very much for listening to me.